Hello and welcome to another video. In the last video, I showed you how to go from this text into this set of data that indicates us each string of text in between which starting and ending time it sits, and these are the captions for a video. Okay, so there was a video. On stream, we created the captions file, which is this one on the left. And on the right, we created in Excel a query to import the data and organize the data in a way that it's easy to know from which timestamp to which timestamp each sentence or portion of text goes. The purpose of this work is to create something like this. Let me show you. Maybe you cannot hear the sound, but the purpose is to find a way of putting the captions below the video in the correct spot where it belongs to. So for example, here, back and say, oh my goodness, let's see where that is here. This one, that's this line and this line. And you see that we are putting two lines at the same time below the video. So what happens now is that the user comes and tells me, oh, it would be so much better if I could have two lines of text always together with a line break in between them, and have for each pair of text strings have the starting and the ending point. So for the first pair, the timestamp for the starting time would be 0008.4, and the ending time would be the second. So minimum of these two for starting time and maximum of these two for the ending time. So this is the exercise we are going to do today in Excel with Power Query. As usual, the exercise files will be in my Telegram channel. The link will be under the video in the video description. So welcome to the Snap Reports class. My name is Celia Alves, and in these videos I teach you how to automate Excel, how to automate your work in Excel. And the goal is to make work in Excel take less time and help improve processes, making work more efficient to everyone involved in a certain process. In today's video, we will look at an example where a solution is already in place, but we still have room for improvements. These classes are for you, so feel free to send your feedback and your questions that will help me create better content for you and for other people. Leave your like, subscribe the channel, and share these videos with your coworkers or anyone you think may take advantage of the content. I am here today because others have shared their content online for free. I've been learning a lot with other content producers, and the purpose here is to share what I know with you today, and hopefully you can share this content with others and continue this chain of doing good. Okay, so let me show you the solution that we have already in place. We have this Excel file. If we go to data, queries and connections, we see that we have already a query built in here. And if we double click on it or right click and edit, we can see the steps that were created there. And again, this will be available in my Telegram channel. Feel free to check the file there. And feel free to watch the previous video. I will put the link below this one to understand how we went from a situation like this, where the text we were importing came like that, to a situation where we now have this. Okay, this query is not important for the exercise today. What's important is that we now have a table with data. This table happens to be the result of a previous query, but it could be a table that already existed in this spreadsheet that was created here directly or that was imported from another source. It doesn't matter. So what matters is that we are starting from this initial table here, and this will be the data source for our next query. And remember, our goal is to group rows in pairs in a way that text for 2 rows shows in one cell only, and in the start column we get the minimum of the 2 times for those rows, and in the end column we get the maximum of the 2 values under end column. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will start by referencing the previous query, but again, you could start by importing your data from another file or start by importing the data from an Excel table into Power Query. So let's go to Data Queries and Connections. I have my query here, and I'm going to do right click and now reference. What this will do is it creates a new query for which the source is the captions, and the captions is the name of the previous query. So the source for this query is the ending table, the table we have at the very last step of the query captions, the table that was generated by that query. For this one, let's call this query here captions in pairs, like that. You could use spaces if you wanted to. When we want to work with pairs of rows or sets of 2 rows or sets of a certain number of rows, it is usually helpful to start with creating an index column. We already have that index column here. So now I need to find a way of transforming these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. in groups of repeated numbers so that the same 2 rows that I want to group are identified by the same number. So I can come to transform. I don't need to add a new column, so I will use the transform tab. And in here, let's choose the standard button here and choose integer divide. And since I want to group in groups of 2, I'll go with the value 2 here and say OK. By doing that, we see now that we got 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. Why did that happen? So when we divided by 2, that operation gives us the entire portion of the division by 2. So 1 divided by 2 is 0, 2 divided by 2 is 1, 3 divided by 2 is 1, 4 divided by 2 is 2, 5 divided by 2 is 2, and so on. We can see now that we would like this to start with 1, 1. So to address that, let's go up one step, and before we divide by 2, we can maybe come here and add 1. Insert a step, yes. Add 1 to all the numbers. So now we start with 2. And when we now go back to the next step, now we have our rows numbered 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, etc. the way we want it. Okay, so now let's do this very cool trick in Excel with Power Query. Let's come to Home tab and choose Group By. And now we are going to explain how we want to group the columns. We want to group them by the index, the value in the index column. So that's correct. But then I want to keep the 3 columns together. Okay, so let's come to Advanced, the remaining 3 columns I meant, right? So let's come to Advanced, and in here we say, I want a new column name called Start. I'll give it the same name as there. And for this column, I want to pick the minimum value every time several rows are grouped together. I want to pick the minimum value. And this is for the values under the start column. add aggregation. For the end column, I will give the same name to the generated column after this step. I want to pick the maximum value between all the values that are under the end column for the rows with the same index value. Okay. And finally, I want to add a column that I will call text the same way as this column. It could be a different name, but we can just stick with the same name. And I don't want to do any aggregation. I want to get all the rows. Okay. This is grayed out. We cannot choose any option there. So let's just do OK and see what we get. Okay. So in here, I get for the index column only one row per index value. In the start, let's see if this is doing the correct aggregation. So if we go up one step here, the previous two index 1 rows had 8 seconds, 0.41 and 13 seconds. So the minimum would be 8.41. Let's check the next step, 841. Okay. Going up again, the two rows with index 1 had values 13.01 and 15.53. So I want to pick up the maximum because when in the video these two lines of text are posted, they need to start from this moment. They need to be showing up in the video starting on this moment, ending in that moment. So 15.53. And this is what we get here under end column. So this is correct. Here, if we type outside the table word, just in the blank space here, we can see that in this column text, each cell contains one table with all the rows associated with that index number. So here I have the two rows with 1. Here I have another table with the two rows for index 2 and so on. For this to generate, what I want is to extract the text. We need to do something here with the M code. We can come here to this portion at the end related to the text column that we created. Delete everything after this underscore inside that step. And I want to check something here. The name of the column I want to get on my next step was column text. It happens to be the same name as the next generated column. So, but I'm referring to this text name that I had before. In fact, what we can do to make sure you don't get confused here, let's say I say text grouped or grouped text. Group text is the name of my new column. Okay, let's do OK. So now the column is called group text. And I want to change my code here and say each. Now I'll delete everything here, type table, square bracket ends here. So let's delete this. And here I'm going to say, give me the column text from the previous step. Okay. Let's validate the step here. And now what we got was a list instead of the table that we had before. And this list is composed by the values in the previous text column belonging to the rows that had index number 1 here, and then this one, the two rows that had index number 2, and so forth. Now I want to expand this list in a way that gives me the two rows together in the same cell. To do that, we come here to expand to new rows. No, if we expand to new rows, we will get double rows for each index number. That's not what we want. So let's do extract values. And in here, select the delimiter to use for concatenating list values. We will use a custom value here, delimiter, and I'm going to put a check mark where it says concatenate using special characters. And here I can choose the special character. I will go with carriage return and line feed just to make sure I have the two rows broken down. Okay, so that's it. Let's do OK. And there we go. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Now we have index number, starting time, end time, and the two rows of text combined together. So now let's do home, close and load to. Let's put a table in the existing worksheet. Let's put it here on the side of this one. And OK. And now we have the two tables. Let's just compare and see if they are looking good. Here it seems that now the text is not showing correctly, but what we can do is we can come to this table and make sure to format the text with wrap text here. I'm going to even select the header as well, wrap text, and there we go. And for example, these values here, we can put them all showing at the top of the cell. So let's do that. And there we go. So now we have the text, two rows grouped together in the same cell, starting time and ending time. The times here came rounded to the whole number. We already went through this exercise in the previous lesson. What we need to do is to format the time, the numbers here. So for example, here the value would be 15.5 and is showing 16. It's rounded to the whole second. So now let's see the number formatting here. Let's select the two columns and we see there's a custom number formatting being applied there. Let's come to more number formats. And here we can see we have days. We don't need days. So let's delete the D and the dot. And at the end, in seconds, I want to add a decimal place, so dot 0. Okay. So now I get the same values that I had before. So let's compare the two columns. Let's bring this one here. So before we had these two columns are being combined here. The text is in the same cell, starting time 8.4, ending time 15.5. That's correct. Then the other two are being grouped in this cell here, and the starting time needs to be 15.5 and the ending time should be 20.8. So that's correct. So there we go. That's what we needed. So now let's just test this. And the way this solution is working is that the following. We have to put the folder and the name of the file here, and the query that generates this table that now feeds the query that we created today is reading the path from this cell that combines those two to know which file to pick up and then work with that file. Again, if you are interested in knowing how this was built, you can check the previous video. Before we do what I was saying, before we test, let's do something else. We don't need to see this table here anymore. So this table was the result of importing the text and do some transformations. And then we went further with the transformations with this table here. And this is the only table we need to see at the end, or that the user needs to see at the end to do the work. So we can come to data, queries and connections. The first query now can be loaded to only create connection, and it's telling me that the table will be deleted. I'll say okay, so that's good. Now we can move this table here to the left. So let's select the entire table. Let's bring it here to column A, and this column here can be wider, and there we go. So let's test this query with a new file. I have this folder here where the VTT files are the files with captions. So let's, for example, use file N04, okay? I need to copy the folder and put it there. It's in fact the same folder that we had before. So in this case, I would have not needed to do this. And then pick the file name, copy, and put it here in this cell. And what happens is that now this cell combines, if we see the formula here, is combining D1 with D2 with backslash in the middle and extension .vtt at the end, because all these files have that extension. Then the captions query, the first query that we created in the previous video, the first thing it does is to read from the cell named captions file. And that cell is exactly, if you see here, the name of the cell is exactly this cell here, where the complete file path is available for the query to know where to find the source. Okay, so enough talking. We put here a new file. Let's come to the captions pairs, the second query, and do refresh, or we could also do a refresh all. Now we got 11 rows only. You see less rows than before, and we got the new text here. So it's working well. And this is the solution that I had to show you today. We already had a solution in place for the captions problem, but we were able to improve that solution, making it easier and more enjoyable for the user to work with it, because now the person has just to select that cell in the text column, copy and paste in the video editing program without having to be copying two rows, each one individually. This is how automation sometimes happens. We start with what we call a minimum viable product, so something that is good enough to start working with. And then as we receive feedback from the user, we can improve, add new features, improve some of the steps in the previous solution that we built. Automation does not really need to happen all at once in one step. It can be built over time in small increments. However, of course, if we can have the big picture from the beginning, if we can have an idea of all the things that we will need to build over time, that can also be helpful when we are starting with the first few features, building the first few features in our solution. Because if we know what will happen down the road, then we can account for that and take that into consideration in the way that we build the solution for the first few features. It's like building a house, right? If we are building a house that we know that in the future we want it to be bigger, and we know that now we are starting with just a portion, and in a few years down the road we will add new rooms to in a certain spot of the house, then we can already account for that and make sure that the pipes are not passing through the walls that we want to break in the future, for example. So everything will be smoother down the road in the next phase of the project, and everything will work better. But that does not always happen. So we need to work with the circumstances we have in each case. In any case, forcing us to address the user's wishes makes us evolve and build on our skill set. There is at least one detail that I would like to improve in this solution. Let me know in the comments if you think you know which one it is. What is it in this solution that is still annoying, that if you were the user having to import the captions and copy them to another program, what is it still in the steps that I showed you that is not very comfortable and you wish it could be easier? I will show you that in the next video. Okay, so again, feel free to check the Telegram channel. The link is below the video. The exercise files will be there, so the files that I used to create the solution will be there, and you can use them to follow along with the video. And of course, this class again was for you, and I am very interested in your feedback, because that will help me create better content, serve you better in the next few and in the next classes. I read all the comments Please leave your testimonials in the video comments, and let me know if you were able to apply some of the tips I gave you here. And it helps me again create better content for you, and it helps other people also perceiving the value of these videos and make this community grow over time. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share these videos with your friends and your coworkers. So let's continue this chain of doing good and by helping other people doing better work in Excel. That's all for today. Bye now.